Hello friends, welcome back to Tutorials in English Literature. In today's lesson, I shall discuss in detail about a unique genre of 18th century literature. Yes, you are right. It is periodical essays. The periodical essays was a new literary form that emerged during the early part of 18th century. Periodical essays typically appeared in affordable publications that came out regularly, usually 2 or 3 times a week, and were only 1 or 2 pages in length. Unlike other publications of the time that consisted of a medley of information and news, periodical essays were comprised of a single essay on a specific topic or theme, usually concerned with the conduct or manners. They were often narrated by a person or a group of personas, commonly referred to as club. There are many reasons, many factors that made periodical essays very popular in 18th century England. The first and foremost reason of the popularity of periodical essay in the 18th century was the rise of the middle classes. Literary productions before the 18th century or even in 18th century were about the higher strata of society, for the aristocratic society. Think about Alexander Pope's magnum opus, Rape of the Lock. Common man was absent there. On the other hand, periodical essay was the literature of the middle class. It gave them what they wanted to read. Again, the educated middle class individuals who held learning in high esteem were not scholars or intellectuals. For that reason, they demanded for easier reading. The periodical essay fulfilled their demand. It was a delicate and sensitive synthesis mixture of literature and the modern day journalism. It usually covered not more than 2 sides of a folio half sheet. Quite often it was even shorter. It could be read, appreciated and discussed at the tea table or in the coffee house, and so it easily attracted the common readers. Women were also a growing part of these readers, and periodical editors often tried to appeal to them in their publications. They were our main target audience for the Spectator, which was the most famous of all the periodicals that existed in 18th century. One of the aims of the Spectator was to increase the number of women who were of a more elevated life and conversation. Another vital factor that lies behind the popularity of periodical essays is the fact that it suited the moral temper of the bourgeois middle class, who were the main readers of periodical essays. The average middle class man was sick of the unthinking epicureanism of the Cavalier and the rigid asceticism of the Puritan. The periodical essayists, particularly Addison and Steele, synthesized these two opposing views of life. As Addison put it, The task of Mr. Spectator was to temper wit with morality and to enliven morality with wit. That means their essays were instructive and at the same time entertaining. The development of coffee house also played an important role in the rise of periodical essays. These coffee houses were public social places where men could meet for conversation, to communicate news, to exchange ideas, and to discuss about contemporary events. These coffee houses became increasingly associated with the news culture as news became available in variety of forms throughout coffee houses. In London, there were many coffee houses, and the Spectator and the Tatler were considered the most important venue of print news that circulated in coffee houses. Another significant reason for the general popularity of the periodical essays was that they shunned religious and political controversies and kept their attention focused only on topics of general interest. We know that in that time, the two political parties, Tory and Whigs, competed fiercely with each other, and that was a common topic of debate. But these essays kept themselves aloof from this kind of controversy, and so members of both the party were interested to read these periodicals. Mr. Spectator says in the very first issue of the Spectator, "I never espoused any party with violence and am resolved to observe an exact neutrality between the Whigs and Tories." While the periodical essays emerged during the 18th century and reached its peak in publications like the Tatler and the Spectator, its roots can be traced back in the late 17th century. An important forerunner, precursor to the Spectator is John Danton's Athenaeum Mercury. Several features of the Athenaeum Mercury, such as the epistolary format and its creation of a fictional club, would be continued by another influential periodical published during 18th century, and it was by Daniel Defoe. The name of the periodical is The Review. Most issues of The Review consisted of a single essay, usually covering a political topic, which was followed by questions and answers section called the Mercure Scandal, or Advice from the Scandal Club, translated out of French, and this section was very popular. The English periodical essay that we know today began its first flowering in the Tatler, reaching its full bloom in the hands of Joseph Addison. The first issue of the Tatler appeared on 12th April in 1709. Try to remember these dates. These dates are very important for MCQ. The paper ran on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays, the days on which mail was delivered in the countryside. Though Addison contributed to the Tatler much less than Steele, yet he soon overshadowed his friend. Of the 271 numbers, 188 are Steele's and 42 Addison's. 36 of them were written by both jointly. In Tatler, Steele used the persona of Isaac Bickerstaff, a fictional character originally contrived by another famous satirist of this age, Jonathan Swift. Though at first issued as a newspaper presenting accounts of London's political, social and cultural life, this periodical soon began investigating English manners and society, establishing principles of ideal behavior and gentle conduct, and proposing standards of good taste for the general public. For that reason, dueling, gambling, rakish behavior and coquettishness were criticized and virtuous action was admired. While discussing the social picture of Restoration age, I have mentioned that these vices were flourishing in that age, and Puritans hailed these vices as a great disease of the age. As regards of the aims of the paper, Steele, in dedication to the first collected volume, tells that the general purpose of this paper is to expose the false arts of life, to pull off the disguises of cunning, vanity, affectation, and recommend a general simplicity in our dress, our discourse, and our behavior. What is interesting in this model is that it did not just engage in the didactic moralism typical of the Anglican devotional literature, but rather presented moral considerations in a new, playful and informal way. Without any warning to his readers, Steele suddenly stopped Tatler on 2nd January in 1711. But 2 months later, on 1st March in 1711, the Spectator began its memorable career of 555 numbers up to 6th December of 1712. Whereas the Tatler had appeared only 3 times a week, the Spectator appeared daily excepting Sundays. Spectator offered a wide range of material to its readers, from discussion of the latest fashions to serious disquisitions on criticism and morality, including Addison's weekly papers on John Milton's famous creation Paradise Lost, and the series on the pleasures of the imagination is also very important. It attracted a growing readership. In bringing learning out of the closets and libraries, schools and colleges, to dwell in clubs and assemblies, at tea tables and in coffee houses, the Spectator was eminently successful. It broke the boundaries of conventional learning. It became tremendously popular among the English men and women belonging to all walks of life. One feature of the Spectator that deserves particular mention is its critical essays, in which Addison sought to elevate public taste. He devoted a considerable proportion of his essays to literary criticism, which was to prove influential in the subsequent development of English novel. His own gift for drawing realistic human characters found brilliant literary expression in the members of the Spectator Club, in which such figures as Sir Roger de Coverley, Captain Sentry, Sir Andrew Freeport, William Honeycomb, Sir Will Umble, and the Spectator himself represent important section of contemporary society. So it was a mirror to the social and cultural world of England. More than 3,000 copies of the Spectator were published daily, and the 555 numbers were then collected into 7 volumes of books. 2 years later, from 18th June to 20th December of 1714, Addison published 80 additional numbers with the help of 2 assistants, and these were later reprinted as 8th volume of this series. These volumes of books were continued to sell for the rest of the century, and from this fact we can realize how much popular was Addison and Steele's creation. Famous literary critic Rickett sees Steele and Addison as co-crafters, each of whom could give what the other lacked. Steele was a passionate man of romantic mindset, whose novelty was inventive. Addison, a finished writer, was correct, scholarly, and certainly humorous. He is more dignified, classical, and, as per several critics, superior to Steele. The tremendous popularity of the Tatler and Spectator prompted many imitations. Among them may be mentioned the Tory Taller, which was another periodicals of that age. Some other significant mentions are the Female Tatler, Tit for Tat, and the North Taller. The best of all was Steele's own Guardian, which had a run of 175 numbers from 12th March to 1st October of 1713. It was like the Spectator a daily. A factor which diminished its interest was its open indulgence in political affairs. The Englishman, the successor of the Guardian, was even more politically biased, and for that reason it was also a failure. Steele's Lover and Addison's Freeholder, 2 periodicals, followed the Englishman, but none was as successful as Tatler or the Spectator. But there are other writers too who followed Addison and Steele. In the second half of the 18th century, the periodical essays showed a tendency to cease as an independent publication and to get incorporated into the newspaper. The series of about 100 papers of Dr. Johnson, called The Idler, for example, was contributed to newspaper. The name of the newspaper is the Universal Chronicler, and it appeared between 15th April 1758 to 5th April 1760. These papers are lighter and shorter than those published in the periodical paper of the Rambler. It was also by Samuel Johnson. Johnson's The Rambler appeared twice a week between 20th March 1750 and 14th March 1752 and ran to 208 numbers. Dr. Johnson, as a periodical essayist, was much more serious in purpose than Steele and Addison had been. His lack of humor and unrelieved gravity, coupled with his ponderous English, make his Rambler papers quite heavy reading. And from this property, Spectator and Tatler were free of, because there the writer followed the middle style. Oliver Goldsmith also contributed to no fewer than 10 periodicals. His own B ran to only 8 weekly numbers. The Citizen of the World, His best work is a collection of essays which originally appeared in the Public Ledger as Chinese letters from 1760 to 1761. Goldsmith's essays are rich in human details, a quivering sentimentalism, and candidness of spirit. His prose style is likewise quite attractive. He avoids bitterness, coarseness, pedantry, and stiff wit. So it was attractive for the general reader. The popularity of the periodical essay eventually started to wane. However, and essays began appearing more often in periodicals that included other materials. By the mid-18th century, periodicals comprised of a single essay eventually completely disappeared from the market. And after that, it was gradually replaced by newspaper, but it developed the English prose immensely, especially Addison and Swift with their middle style prepared the English language for journalism. It corrected the prose and made it suitable for journalistic writing. With its plot and character, it also paved the way for novel, which became the dominant genre for the rest of the century. So that's all for today. If you like to know more about Restoration Age, check the description box and there you will find link to videos about Restoration Age, and it will help to understand the socio-cultural background in which periodical essays flourished. If you find this video interesting, please like this video. If you have any query, you can ask me in the comment section. One more thing, if you find this video helpful, please consider to subscribe to my channel, and you will surely get regular updates of quality content like this. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching.